Women have always inspired me and they have always been a great source of strength. And today, I get to speak to one such woman, Kirstine Stewart. Her journey to the top has been chronicled in her book, Our Turn, but it's more than just that. It's about finding your voice and learning how to use it to create positive change. Here's my chat with Kirstine. She's the author of the book, Our Turn, which chronicles her experiences as a woman climbing the ladders in a male-dominated world. Having been the head of programming at CBC, the VP of Twitter Canada, and now the Chief Strategy Officer at Pillai, Kirstine Stewart has some advice worth listening to. I had the chance to touch base with her at a Women's Day panel at Andrew's clothing store this month, and here's what she's got to say about finding your voice. So the one and only Kirstine.
Hi. So good to see you.
Yes, always so good to see you, and I finally get to have my date with you.
I love it. I love it.
But you know, I've always wanted to speak to you about being a woman, because in my eyes, you are that pinnacle example of what it means to be a woman.
Well, we're all trying, aren't we?
Yes. So talk to me about that. Do you feel pressured by that label?
I think sometimes the pressure comes when you recognize that you're the only woman, or there's very few women in a situation. Like, I'll be on a panel or I'll be in a boardroom, and it's quite obvious that you're one of the few, if not the only. And when you're there in moments like that, it's when you recognize how much responsibility you have to carry yourself in a certain way, because you're representing people that aren't in the room. And you feel lonely. Like, ultimately you feel lonely. You want there to be more of you around. And I think that's, the biggest kind of challenge that I've had, and what I've been trying to do is make sure there's more of us sitting at the table.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of that excerpt that I came across in your book where you felt like you had to you decided to dress a certain way, and people were going to ask you whether you had to fit that stereotype. And all of a sudden there was that pressure. Am I supposed to look a certain way?
Particularly, when you're in what's considered to be a serious job. And there was a great piece I was just reading yesterday, actually, for International Women's Day, the question of like what you look like. Like, if you try too hard, then you're silly and frivolous. If you don't try at all, then you're slouchy and abhorrent. So it's we all of us live in these in-between spaces where you're trying to figure out what is acceptable to others. The only way to get through that is to just recognize what's authentic for yourself, because you cannot please all of the people. And sometimes it's those kind of vocal minorities that make the loudest noise about what they think about you. When you have a whole bunch of people behind you supporting you, that you really should be paying attention more to them.
But you described it so well. There are these two extremes, and then women are stuck right in the middle. You do one, you're damned. You do the other, you're damned. And I know a lot of minorities will have that experience too. But as a woman, how did you get out of that space? Do you feel like you're even out of it?
No, I think you're always grappling with it in whatever way, and you have to develop a thick skin, and there's all these things you can do for coping mechanisms. But I actually had a aha moment when I was presenting the first lineup that I'd ever done for the CBC, and I think this is the part you're referring to in the book. And I cared about what I wore that day, but what I was saying was supposed to be so much more important. I was unveiling the first lineup for the CBC. And the next morning, because there was not Twitter back then, I ran to the papers to see how people reacted to it. And there's this description of me, Kirstine, whip thin in a red dress and stiletto heels. And I was mortified because I thought I had let everyone down by taking attention for myself. I wasn't mature enough to understand I should have been angry in that moment. And I was walking the halls soon after then, and a young woman came up to me, because I was very new to the CBC at the time, and she said, "Are you Kirstine?" Yes, and we had a little chat. She said, "I just wanted you to know how happy we are that you're here. Because you look like us, you dress like us, you talk like us, we could be you. We think we have this future." And I thought, why am I listening to one guy who wrote an article? Because I had resolved I was going to cut my hair, buy Birkenstocks, I was going to be that serious person they expected me to be. And I'm like, that's not me. I don't feel confident in being someone that I'm not, and I can't do my best job if I'm not being who I am. So I took the almost advice of that young woman, and I thought, you know what? That's who I'm doing this for, not the guy who wrote the article.
I know at that moment, reading an article like that can affect people in very negative ways. And you saw who you were impacting in a positive way, and it kind of fueled your purpose.
Yes.
How has the reception been for your book?
And
really how has it fueled your purpose even further?
It has. It's been out a year now. The paperback is coming out very shortly, so that's another exciting time to kind of revisit it. It's been released in Australia and some other places, so I've been able to tour with the book. And I think the thing that's been most satisfying is how people say that it is their story too.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I've read a lot of those other books. We've all read Lean In and books like that, and there's some disconnectedness between her experiences and kind of the everyday life. And yet, I think what I talk about is how there is no one path, how we all kind of get to where we are differently, and how choice is actually the most important thing. So the reception to the book has been very much like, I know what you're going through, I've been through that too, and they find things helpful. I've had people write me afterwards, even in the preview copy was out, and journalists were reading it. I had a young woman who was at a newspaper at the time thinking about changing careers to a magazine. She said, I read your book and I went for it. And she did, and she's very wonderfully sitting in a national magazine now, and a great job. So I love that it gave people hope or direction, or just a feeling that someone else like them is out there trying to make it work too, and that it's not going to be all perfect, but we're all just doing the best we can. So I think in that has been a really kind of humbling experience, but also very kind of like, yeah, we need to do this. We need to talk about this more, spread
Absolutely.
the word.
What identity did you approach this book with? Who were you as a woman when you started writing this, and who did you become throughout the process?
Yeah,
and where you are now.
It's a great process because you don't know what stories that you have inside of you are interesting to others.
Yeah,
because sometimes,
yeah,
and I had to work with someone. I had to work with someone who wrote the book with me, who could draw out those stories, because I would pass over something that happened, and she'd be like, "No, that's it. That's interesting." And when you live it yourself, you just don't get the same sense. And I'm inherently more shy, so you just don't know how much
I would never see that.
Where you need to go. Yeah, totally. And so you just don't know where you need to go with things. And so it was great to be working with someone who could draw those stories out. So I think I started from a premise where I wanted to give, our turn is all about giving women the opportunity to look for their turn and seize the moment. And I think, going through the process of writing the book made you realize how many choices you've made in your own career, how many choices I've made in my own career that led to this moment, and how many more there's still to come.
And just before we started rolling, we were talking about Trump.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that our time is now.
Yes.
And that's the whole purpose and the concept of the book, is our time is now.
Yeah, I think, and I hate to be Pollyanna about these moments, but ultimately, there is no perfect time. Even if Hillary had won, even if all things had been exactly the way we wanted them to be, in whatever world you want to create for yourself, there's always a reason not to go ahead and do something. And if times are tougher than you hope they would be, it should just be giving you that opportunity to look for the cracks and the opportunities in whatever is kind of blocking you. And so what I hope Our Turn does is remind people that bigger things are happening in the world that governments and personalities can't stop, and that's progress. And it doesn't really matter if someone says this isn't acceptable anymore. Guess what? Were you going to pull all the LGBTQ characters off of TV? You going to how you reverse time? You can't. There is no time capsule. So progress is happening. How do you position yourself in that, and how do you use the moment to exert yourself and your voice?
My last question to you is, what do you want young women to really strive for today? Being a woman today has its own set of challenges, has a whole new circumstance. What do you want them to do to stay empowered, be empowered, and create change?
Well, I think it's, again, a matter of understanding that you have a voice. Technology has actually allowed that voice to be amplified in ways that's never happened before. There's problems inherent in that because you get the flip side of kind of social media, but there is opportunity. And you can build your brand, you can build your direction, your motivation through avenues you never could before. And it's all about personal choice. So ultimately, you don't have to check off that box and live the life someone else thinks you should be living. If you are happy doing the job you're doing right now, but think that maybe isn't enough, think about why it isn't enough for you. What's motivating you to take that next step, and then take that next step. But if you think it's because someone is telling you you need that next title, or by 30 you should be at X place, and it's not about that. It's all about living the way you want to live, because you can now lead from many levels. You don't have to be the CEO of a company to have influence anymore. There's so many ways to have influence that you can actually do it from where you're sitting and be a boss and be a leader in your own way.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank you, Daniel. Great to talk to you.